What really happens when you cross the line with your ex right in front of the person you promised to love? Can a single dance truly destroy a relationship? Or is it what comes after, when the truth finally comes out, that ends everything? The answer came to my door in a thick envelope, delivered by a stranger. My boyfriend's revenge wasn't what I expected. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The rooftop bar glittered with string lights and the laughter of 30-somethings pretending we weren't all getting older. Sarah's birthday party was in full swing, and I should have been having fun. Instead, I felt Owen's hand tense on my lower back the moment Callum walked through the glass doors. "You didn't tell me he'd be here," Owen murmured in my ear, his voice tight. I turned to face my boyfriend of 3 years, forcing a bright smile. "I had no idea Sarah invited him. It's fine, Owen. We're adults." But it wasn't fine, and we both knew it. Callum Ashby had a way of commanding attention wherever he went. At 34, he still had that easy confidence that had drawn me to him 5 years ago. His dark hair was perfectly tousled, his smile crooked in that way that made women forget they had boyfriends. "Morwenna," Callum's voice cut through the crowd like he owned the place. "Look at you, beautiful as ever." He approached with 2 drinks, handing me one without asking if I wanted it. The gesture was presumptuous, intimate in a way that made Owen step closer to my side. "Callum," I said, accepting the drink. The glass was cold against my palm, condensation already forming. "This is Owen. Owen, this is Callum." The 2 men shook hands with the kind of firm grip that said more than words ever could. Owen's jaw was set, his usually warm brown eyes guarded. Callum's smile never wavered, but I caught the way his gaze swept over Owen, assessing, dismissing. "So, you're the lucky guy," Callum said. "Morwenna's told me so much about you." I hadn't told Callum anything about Owen, but I didn't correct him. The lie hung in the air between us, electric and dangerous. "She's mentioned you too," Owen replied evenly, though his hand found mine and squeezed. A warning or a plea, I couldn't tell which. The conversation should have ended there. We should have moved on, mingled with other guests, celebrated Sarah's 32nd birthday like normal people. Instead, I found myself laughing too loudly at Callum's jokes, touching his arm when he told stories about our mutual friends. "Remember that time we got caught in the rain at Millennium Park?" Callum asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You were wearing that white dress, and we had to take shelter under that tiny pavilion." I did remember. I remembered how the rain had made my dress cling to my skin, how Callum had wrapped his jacket around my shoulders, how we'd kissed under the sound of thunder. I also remembered that Owen was standing right there, watching my face as the memory played across it. "That was a long time ago," I said, but my voice was breathless, betraying me. Owen's sister Tamsin appeared at my elbow like a guardian angel. "Morwenna, can I steal you for a second? Sarah wants to take some photos." I should have gone with her, should have put distance between myself and the growing tension. Instead, I waved her off. "In a minute, Tam, we're just catching up." Tamsin's eyes flicked between me and Callum, her expression troubled. She'd always been protective of Owen, and right now she looked like she wanted to physically drag me away. "Just be careful," she whispered in my ear before melting back into the crowd. But careful was the last thing I felt like being. The wine was making everything softer around the edges, and Callum's attention was like sunlight after a long winter. Owen had been distant lately, buried in work, taking me for granted. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Callum was looking at me now? "Dance with me," Callum said suddenly, extending his hand as the DJ switched to something slow and sultry. I glanced at Owen, who was staring at Callum's outstretched hand like it was a loaded weapon. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Come on," Callum pressed, his smile widening. "One dance, for old time's sake." The smart thing would have been to say no. The right thing would have been to take Owen's hand instead, to show everyone where my loyalty lay. But the wine and the music and the way Callum was looking at me made me reckless. "One dance," I heard myself saying, placing my hand in his. Owen's face went very still. "Morwenna." But I was already letting Callum lead me onto the small dance floor, already feeling his hands settle on my waist like they belonged there. The music wrapped around us, and suddenly we were moving together, like no time had passed at all. "You look incredible tonight," Callum murmured against my ear, his breath warm on my neck. I should have stepped back, should have remembered that Owen was watching, that everyone was watching. Instead, I let myself melt into the familiar rhythm of Callum's movements, let my body remember what it felt like to be desired. "This is dangerous," I whispered, but I didn't pull away. "The best things usually are," he replied, spinning me slowly so that I could see Owen over his shoulder. My boyfriend stood frozen by the bar, his drink untouched in his hand. His face was a mask of hurt and humiliation, and for a moment, I felt a stab of guilt so sharp it nearly made me stumble. But then Callum pulled me closer, and the guilt dissolved into something darker, more thrilling. Let Owen see. Let him remember that other men found me desirable, that he wasn't the only option I had. The song seemed to go on forever, each note stretching between us like a promise or a threat. Callum's hands were warm through the thin fabric of my dress, his body solid and familiar against mine. I caught sight of Sarah watching us with raised eyebrows, of Tamsin shaking her head in disapproval, of Owen's mother Carol looking like she'd swallowed something bitter. But I didn't care. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, I let myself be 28 again. Let myself be the girl who could have any man she wanted. When the music finally ended, I stepped back from Callum breathlessly, my cheeks flushed with wine and adrenaline. The spell broke as I turned to look for Owen, ready to smooth things over with a laugh and a kiss. But Owen was gone. His drink sat abandoned on the bar, ice melting into pale amber liquid. His jacket was missing from the back of his chair. I scanned the crowd frantically, but there was no sign of his familiar broad shoulders or sandy brown hair. "Looks like your boyfriend couldn't handle a little competition," Callum said, but his voice sounded distant now, muffled by the sudden ringing in my ears. I grabbed my purse and pushed through the crowd toward the elevators, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Owen was supposed to get jealous, supposed to fight for me, supposed to remind me why I chose him in the first place. He wasn't supposed to just leave. The apartment was dark when I finally made it home, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors like accusations. Owen's keys were on the kitchen counter, his phone charging by the bed, but he was nowhere to be found. I checked the bathroom, the spare room, even the balcony, growing more frantic with each empty space. I found him in Lily's room, sitting in the rocking chair we'd bought when she was a baby, staring at our sleeping 8-year-old daughter. The nightlight cast soft shadows across his face, making him look older, more tired than his 36 years. "There you are," I whispered, relief flooding through me. "You scared me, just disappearing like that." He didn't look at me. She was having a nightmare when I got home, about us fighting. The words hit me like a slap. Lily had always been sensitive to tension, picking up on things we thought we'd hidden from her. "We weren't fighting." "No," Owen said quietly, finally meeting my eyes. "We weren't fighting. You were dancing with your ex-boyfriend while I stood there like an idiot." I bristled at his tone, at the judgment in his voice. "It was just a dance, Owen. You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" He stood slowly, careful not to wake Lily, and gestured for me to follow him out of the room. In the hallway, with the door closed behind us, he finally let his composure crack. "Do you have any idea how that looked? How it felt to watch you in his arms, looking at him like that?" "Like what?" I demanded, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Like you wanted to be there. Like you'd forgotten I existed." The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. For those few minutes on the dance floor, I had forgotten. I'd let myself get lost in the memory of who I used to be, in the intoxicating feeling of being wanted. But I wasn't about to admit that to Owen. "You're being paranoid," I said instead, crossing my arms over my chest. "Callum is an old friend. We danced to one song. If you can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't me." Owen stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Maybe you're right. Maybe the problem is me expecting my girlfriend to have enough respect for our relationship not to grind on her ex in public. I wasn't grinding on anyone." The words came out louder than I'd intended, and we both froze, listening for sounds from Lily's room. When silence stretched between us, I lowered my voice to a harsh whisper. "You're being dramatic and jealous for no reason. I came home to you, didn't I? Did you want to?" The question caught me off guard. Owen had never been confrontational, never pushed when I deflected. His quiet acceptance of my explanations had always been one of the things I liked about him. This new directness was unsettling. "Of course I wanted to come home," I lied smoothly. "You're my boyfriend. This is my home." But even as I said it, part of me was remembering the way Callum had smiled when he'd asked for my number, just to stay in touch. Part of me was wondering what would have happened if I'd said yes. Owen studied my face like he was looking for something specific, some sign of the truth I was working so hard to hide. Whatever he saw there made his shoulders sag in defeat. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said finally. "Owen, come on, don't be like this." "Like what? Like someone who doesn't want to share a bed with his girlfriend after she humiliated him in front of his family and friends." The word humiliated hit harder than I expected. I hadn't meant to humiliate him. I just wanted... What had I wanted? To feel alive, to feel desired, to punish him for taking me for granted. "I'm sorry," I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. "I didn't mean for it to look like anything. I was just being friendly." "Friendly?" Owen repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Right." He started toward the guest room, but I caught his arm. "Don't do this. Don't let one stupid dance ruin everything we've built." For a moment I thought he might soften. His hand covered mine where it rested on his forearm, warm and familiar. Then his phone buzzed with a text message, and everything changed. The notification lit up the screen, and I saw my name in the preview. But it wasn't from me. "Callum. Had a great time tonight. Let's do it again soon." Owen stared at the phone, then at me, his face cycling through confusion, hurt, and finally, a cold kind of clarity. "You gave him your number." It wasn't a question. The evidence was right there in black and white, glowing accusingly between us. "It's not what you think," I started, but Owen was already pulling away from me. "What is it then, Morwenna? Because it looks like you gave your ex-boyfriend your number after dancing with him like you wanted to take him home." "We're friends. He just wanted to stay in touch." "Friends?" Owen's laugh was bitter, unlike any sound I'd ever heard from him. "Right. Friends who dance like lovers and exchange numbers behind their boyfriend's back." He was making it sound so much worse than it was. Yes, I'd given Callum my number, but only because he'd asked. It would have been rude to say no. It didn't mean anything, except the flutter in my stomach when his fingers had brushed mine as he'd handed me his phone to enter my contact information, suggested otherwise. "You're overreacting," I said desperately. "Nothing happened. Nothing is going to happen." Owen looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes, something that might have been trust. "You're right," he said quietly. "Nothing is going to happen, because I won't let it." Before I could ask what he meant, he disappeared into the guest room, the door closing between us with a soft but final click. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at that closed door and trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. It was just a dance, just a phone number, just a little harmless flirtation. So why did it feel like I'd just lost something irreplaceable? The next few days passed in a haze of uncomfortable politeness. Owen was cordial but distant, speaking to me only when necessary, sleeping in the guest room, leaving for work before I woke up. He answered when I spoke to him, helped Lily with her homework, did his share of the household chores. But it was like living with a polite stranger, wearing my boyfriend's face. I told myself I didn't care. If Owen wanted to sulk over nothing, that was his choice. I had more important things to worry about than his wounded pride. Like the text messages that had started arriving from Callum. "Good morning, beautiful. Hope you're having a better day than your boyfriend looked like he was having last night. Thinking about that dance. When can we do it again? Your boyfriend doesn't deserve you." Just saying. I should have ignored them, should have blocked his number and focused on fixing things with Owen. Instead, I found myself looking forward to the little buzz of my phone, to the thrill of knowing someone was thinking about me. At work, I caught myself checking my reflection in bathroom mirrors, wondering if Callum would like the way my hair looked, if he'd noticed the new lipstick I'd bought during lunch. It was harmless, I told myself. Just a little ego boost after Owen's cold shoulder treatment. "You seem distracted lately," my coworker Jennifer commented on Wednesday afternoon. "Everything okay at home?" "Everything's fine," I lied, not looking up from the spreadsheet I'd been staring at for 20 minutes without actually seeing. But everything wasn't fine. Owen's silence was getting to me more than I wanted to admit. I missed his morning coffee routine, the way he'd kiss my forehead before leaving for work, the comfortable domesticity we'd built together. I missed feeling like we were a team. "Want to grab coffee after work? I know a place downtown." Callum's text arrived just as I was spiraling into another round of self-pity. I stared at the message for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. It was just coffee. Friends could have coffee. There was nothing wrong with coffee. Sure, send me the address. I sent the text before I could change my mind, then immediately felt sick with guilt and excitement in equal measure. This was crossing a line, and we both knew it. But Owen had been shutting me out for days, treating me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin instead of just dancing with an old friend. Maybe it was time he remembered that he wasn't the only man who found me attractive. I spent the rest of the afternoon crafting elaborate justifications for what I was about to do. I was meeting an old friend for coffee. There was nothing romantic about it. I deserved to have friends, to have a social life outside of Owen's approval. If he was going to punish me with silence, then he couldn't complain about me seeking companionship elsewhere. By 5 o'clock, I'd almost convinced myself that I was the victim in this situation. The coffee shop Callum had chosen was intimate and dimly lit, the kind of place couples went for first dates or affairs. I arrived 10 minutes late, partly from traffic and partly from the 3 times I'd circled the block, second-guessing myself. Callum was waiting at a corner table, 2 cups already steaming in front of him. He stood when he saw me, that crooked smile spreading across his face like he'd won some kind of prize. "You came," he said, pulling out my chair. "It's just coffee," I replied, but my voice sounded breathless even to my own ears. "Of course it is." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Just 2 old friends catching up over coffee. Nothing wrong with that." We talked for 2 hours. About work, about mutual friends, about the years since we'd broken up. Callum was charming and attentive, asking about my life, my dreams, my frustrations. He listened like every word I said was fascinating, like I was the most interesting woman in the world. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that. "You seem different," he said as we prepared to leave. "Sadder, maybe. Is everything really okay with what's his name?" "Owen," I corrected automatically. "And yes, everything's fine." "Is it though?" Callum leaned closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone I remembered so well. "Because you don't seem happy, Morwenna. You seem like a woman who's settling." The words hit too close to home. Was I settling? Owen was steady, reliable, a good father to Lily. But when was the last time he'd made my heart race? When was the last time I'd felt truly alive in his presence? "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. "Of course." Callum stood too, but he caught my hand as I reached for my purse. "But Morwenna, life's too short to waste it on someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. I pulled my hand free, but the warmth of his touch lingered long after I'd walked away. The drive home was a blur of guilt and confusion. I'd crossed a line today, and we both knew it. The coffee had been innocent enough on the surface, but the undercurrent of attraction, of possibility, had been unmistakable. I was playing with fire, and I couldn't seem to stop myself. Owen was in the kitchen when I arrived, heating up dinner for Lily. He glanced up when I walked in, noting my flushed cheeks and slightly disheveled appearance. "You're late," he said mildly. I was starting to worry. "Traffic was terrible," I lied, hanging up my coat. "Sorry." "Mommy!" Lily launched herself at me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Daddy made spaghetti, your favorite." But it wasn't my favorite. Callum had remembered that I preferred Thai food, had suggested we try that new place downtown next time. Next time. I'd already started planning a next time. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of Lily's head. Over her shoulder, I caught Owen watching me with those two perceptive brown eyes. "How was your day?" he asked, and I wondered if I was imagining the edge in his voice. "Fine, boring, you know how it is." He nodded slowly, like he was filing away my response for later analysis. "I picked up groceries. We were running low on a few things." It was such a normal domestic conversation, the kind we'd had hundreds of times before. So why did it feel like we were speaking in code, dancing around truths neither of us wanted to acknowledge? After dinner, after Lily was tucked into bed with her favorite story, Owen and I found ourselves alone in the living room. He was reading a book, I was scrolling through my phone, and the silence between us felt heavy with unspoken words. My phone buzzed with a text from Callum. "Had a wonderful time today. You're even more beautiful than I remembered." I glanced up to see if Owen had noticed, but he was still focused on his book. Still, I deleted the message quickly, my heart racing with guilt and something that felt dangerously like excitement. "I'm going to bed," I announced, standing abruptly. "Good night," Owen replied without looking up. I paused in the doorway, waiting for him to say something more, to ask me to stay, to bridge the gap that seemed to be widening between us every day. But he just turned the page of his book, and I went to bed alone. Sunday dinner at my mother's house had always been a tradition, even after Owen and I had moved in together. Gwendolyn Lyle took pride in her family gatherings, in the perfectly set table and the roast that had been cooking since dawn. Today felt different, though. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and I could feel Owen's discomfort radiating from across the table. "You look tired, Owen," my mother commented, passing him the potatoes. "Are you sleeping well?" "Fine, thank you," Owen replied politely, but I caught the slight tightness around his eyes. Tamsin shot me a look across the table, one eyebrow raised in question. My sister had always been too perceptive for her own good, and I could tell she'd noticed the careful distance Owen was maintaining between us. "How was Sarah's party?" Mom asked, settling into her chair with the satisfied air of someone who'd successfully fed her family. "I haven't seen her in ages." I felt Owen go very still beside me, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. This was dangerous territory, but I couldn't figure out how to navigate around it without making things worse. "It was nice," I said carefully. "Good turnout. Sarah seemed happy." "Did you dance?" Mom pressed, and I wondered if she somehow knew, if the question was as innocent as it sounded. "A little." I reached for my wine glass, needing something to do with my hands. "Morwenna danced with her ex-boyfriend," Lily piped up from her spot between Owen and my father. Daddy was sad about it. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt heat creep up my neck as every eye at the table turned to me. Owen's jaw was tight, his knuckles white where he gripped his fork. "Lily, eat your vegetables," I said weakly, but the damage was done. Mum's eyes had sharpened with interest, Tamsin looked mortified, and Owen's mother Carol had gone very pale. "Your ex-boyfriend was there?" Mom asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Callum," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "He's friends with Sarah too. It was just one dance." Just one dance, Owen repeated quietly, and there was something in his voice that made everyone look at him. Right. Owen, I started, but he was already standing, his napkin falling to the floor. Excuse me, he said, his voice perfectly polite. I need some air. He walked out of the dining room with measured steps, and I heard the front door close behind him with careful restraint. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Well, Mum said finally, reaching for the wine bottle. That was dramatic. Mum, Tamsin warned, but our mother was already pouring herself a generous glass. What? I'm just saying, if Owen can't handle his girlfriend having a friendly dance with an old friend, maybe he needs to examine his own insecurities. Carol Hanley, who had been quietly cutting her roast into smaller and smaller pieces, finally looked up. Insecurities, she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. I just think, Mum continued, oblivious to the warning signs, that a secure man wouldn't be threatened by something so innocent. There was nothing innocent about it. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and everyone turned to stare at me. I'd meant to defend Owen, to show that I understood his feelings. Instead, I'd just confirmed everyone's worst suspicions. What do you mean? Tamsin asked quietly. I looked around the table at the faces of my family, at Lily's confused expression, at Carol's hurt eyes. These were the people who mattered most to me, and I was about to lie to all of them. I mean, it probably looked worse than it was, I said finally. Callum and I have history. Owen was just being protective. It was a careful non-answer, designed to deflect without actually explaining anything, but Tamsin wasn't buying it. Morwenna, she said, her voice gentle but firm, what really happened at that party? Before I could answer, the front door opened and Owen returned, his cheeks flushed from the cold air. He took his seat without looking at anyone, cutting his roast with mechanical precision. Everything okay? Dad asked, speaking for the first time since the conversation had taken this uncomfortable turn. Perfect, Owen replied, but there was nothing perfect about the way he said it. The rest of dinner passed in stilted conversation and awkward silences. Lily chatted about school, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around her, while the adults made careful small talk about weather and work and anything that wasn't the elephant in the room. When we finally left, Carol pulled me aside while Owen was buckling Lily into her car seat. I don't know what's going on between you two, she said quietly, but that boy loves you more than his own life. Don't throw that away for something that won't last. Her words hit me like a physical blow, partly because they were true and partly because I wasn't sure I deserved Owen's love anymore. The drive home was silent except for Lily's sleepy chatter from the back seat. Owen stared straight ahead, his hand steady on the steering wheel, his jaw still tight with suppressed emotion. It wasn't until after Lily was in bed that he finally spoke. We need to talk. I'd been dreading those words for days, but now that they were here, I felt almost relieved. The pretense was exhausting, the careful politeness more painful than an outright fight would have been. Okay, I said, settling onto the couch across from him. Owen sat forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. When he looked up at me, I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench with dread. I know about the coffee. The words hit me like ice water. What coffee? Wednesday afternoon, downtown, with Callum. My mind raced, trying to figure out how he could possibly know. I'd been so careful, hadn't told anyone, had even paid in cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few quick swipes, he pulled up something that made my blood run cold. It was a photo of me and Callum at the coffee shop, leaning across the table toward each other, his hand covering mine. We looked intimate, conspiratorial. We looked like lovers planning an affair. Where did you get that? I whispered. Does it matter? Owen's voice was eerily calm. The question is, what else are you lying to me about? I stared at the photo, at the evidence of my betrayal captured in digital clarity. There was no way to explain it away, no innocent interpretation that would make this okay. "It was just coffee," I said desperately. "We're friends. We were just talking." "Friends?" Owen nodded slowly. "Right. The same way you were just dancing." He stood up, pacing to the window, his back rigid with tension. When he turned around, his face was a mask of hurt and disappointment that cut deeper than anger would have. "I trusted you," he said simply. "Even after the party, even after seeing you in his arms, I trusted you. I thought maybe I was overreacting, maybe I was being jealous for no reason." "You were," I started, but he held up a hand to stop me. "No, I wasn't. Because here you are, lying to my face about meeting him behind my back. So tell me, Morwenna, what else don't I know?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. He was giving me a chance to come clean, to tell him about the text messages, about the way my heart raced when Callum's name appeared on my phone, about the plans we'd started making for another meeting. I could have told him the truth, could have thrown myself on his mercy, begged for forgiveness, promised to cut all contact with Callum. Instead, I doubled down on the lie. "There's nothing else to know. We had coffee. We talked. That's it." Owen stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something fundamental shift in his expression. Whatever trust had survived the party, whatever benefit of the doubt he'd been giving me, died in that moment. "Okay," he said quietly, "if that's how you want to play this." "Play what?" "Owen, you're being paranoid. Nothing happened." But he was already walking away, already retreating to the guest room where he'd been sleeping for a week. "Owen, wait," I called after him, but the door closed between us with that same soft final sound. I sat alone in the living room, staring at my reflection in the black window, and wondered when I'd become someone I didn't recognize. The next few weeks passed in a blur of careful choreography. Owen and I moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, polite and distant and increasingly careful not to touch. He left for work earlier, came home later, spent his free time with Lily or buried in his laptop. I told myself I didn't care. If Owen wanted to shut me out, that was his choice. I had other options. Callum and I had been meeting regularly now, coffee shops, lunch dates, even a dinner when I'd told Owen I was working late. Each meeting felt like stepping further away from my old life and closer to something dangerous and exciting. "You're glowing," Jennifer commented one Thursday afternoon. "New skincare routine." I touched my cheek self-consciously. Was it that obvious? The thrill of secret meetings, of stolen conversations, of feeling desired again. "Just getting more sleep," I lied. But I wasn't sleeping well. The guest room door stayed closed, and I lay awake in our king-size bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the text messages that kept arriving from Callum. "Can't stop thinking about you. Your boyfriend doesn't know what he's losing. When are you going to stop pretending you don't feel this too?" I should have been horrified by the messages. Should have told him to stop, should have blocked his number, should have confessed everything to Owen and begged for forgiveness. Instead, I screenshotted them and hid them in a folder on my phone, reading them over and over like love letters. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Owen was giving Lily a bath when my phone rang, Callum's name flashing on the screen. I should have let it go to voicemail, but the wine I'd had with dinner made me reckless. "Hello?" I answered, stepping onto the balcony for privacy. "Hey, beautiful. Miss me?" His voice was warm and intimate, like we were already lovers instead of whatever we were becoming. "I can't talk long," I said, glancing through the sliding door to make sure Owen wasn't nearby. "Meet me tomorrow night. I know a place in River North. Quiet, intimate. We can finally stop pretending this is just friendship." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment I'd been dancing around for weeks. The point of no return. "Callum, I can't. Owen's already suspicious, and if he finds out..." "So don't let him find out. Tell him you're working late again. Tell him whatever you need to tell him. The casual way he dismissed Owen, like my boyfriend of 3 years was just an inconvenience to be managed, should have bothered me. Instead, it sent a thrill through me that I didn't want to examine too closely. I'll think about it, I heard myself saying. Don't think too long. Life's short, and we've already wasted too much time. After I hung up, I stood on the balcony for a long time, staring out at the city lights and trying to figure out how I'd gotten to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been happy with Owen. We'd been talking about marriage, about giving Lily a sibling, about the future we were building together. Now I was contemplating an affair with my ex-boyfriend, and the worst part was how alive it made me feel. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear Owen come up behind me. Who was that? I spun around, my phone clutched to my chest like evidence. What? The phone call. You looked pretty intense out here. Owen's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. How long had he been watching me? Work stuff, I said quickly. You know how demanding my boss can be. At 9 o'clock on a Friday night? The question hung between us, and I realized I'd been caught in another lie. My boss was notorious for respecting work-life boundaries. Everyone knew that. Emergency project, I said weakly. Owen nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. Right, emergency project. He turned to go back inside, but paused in the doorway. Morwenna, whatever you're thinking about doing, just remember that some choices can't be undone. The word sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the evening air. Did he know? Had he somehow figured out about Callum, about the meetings, about the decision I was wrestling with? But when I looked at his face, all I saw was sadness, deep, bone-weary sadness that made my chest ache with guilt. I don't know what you mean, I said. I hope not, Owen replied quietly, and disappeared into the apartment. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Callum's invitation echoing in my head. Tomorrow night. A quiet restaurant in River North. The chance to finally stop pretending. By morning, I'd made my decision. I spent Saturday in a haze of nervous energy, changing clothes 3 times, doing my makeup twice, telling Owen I had to work late on a presentation that was due Monday. On a Saturday night, he asked, not looking up from the puzzle he was doing with Lily. You know how it is, I said, hating how easily the lies came now. Big client, impossible deadline. Owen nodded, but I caught him watching me in the mirror as I put on earrings that were too nice for a night at the office. Have fun at work, he said, and there was something in his tone that made me pause. But I was already too far down this path to turn back now. The restaurant Callum had chosen was everything he'd promised. Dim lighting, intimate booths, the kind of place where married people brought their affairs. I arrived 15 minutes late, my hands shaking as I gave the hostess his name. Callum was waiting at a corner table, a bottle of wine already open between 2 glasses. He stood when he saw me, that crooked smile spreading across his face like he'd won some kind of victory. You came, he said, kissing my cheek in a way that lingered just a moment too long. I almost didn't, I admitted, sliding into the booth across from him. But you did. That's what matters. The wine was good, better than anything Owen and I usually splurged on. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything and nothing, building the kind of intimacy that felt both familiar and forbidden. You're different than you were at 28, Callum said, reaching across the table to trace the back of my hand with one finger. Different how? More confident, more sure of what you want. And what do I want? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. This, he said simply, turning my hand over and pressing his palm against mine. Us, the way we used to be, but better. I should have pulled my hand away, should have made some excuse and left, gone home to Owen and Lily and the life I'd been systematically destroying for weeks. Instead, I let my fingers curl around his and felt something inside me surrender. One night, I whispered, just to see. Callum's smile was triumphant. One night, he agreed, But we both knew it was a lie. We never made it to dessert. I came home at 2 in the morning, my hair still smelling like Callum's cologne, my lips swollen from kisses that tasted like betrayal and wine. The apartment was dark, silent, and for a moment I thought I'd gotten away with it. Then I saw Owen sitting at the kitchen table, still fully dressed, a manila folder open in front of him. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. My heart stopped. There was something about his tone, about the careful way he was sitting, that made every instinct I had scream danger. "Fine," I managed. "Long. You didn't have to wait up." Actually, I did. Owen finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my knees weak. Not anger. I could have handled anger. This was something colder, more final. "We need to talk." I wanted to run, wanted to lock myself in the bathroom and scrub off the evidence of what I'd done, wanted to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. Instead, I found myself moving toward the table, like a moth drawn to flame. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing at the papers spread across the surface. "Evidence," Owen said simply. "Sit down, Morwenna." The use of my full name sent another chill through me. Owen only called me Morwenna when he was serious, when something was really wrong. I sat down across from him, my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. Up close, I could see what was in the folder. Photographs, printed text messages, bank statements, receipts. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago," Owen said conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. "After I found out about the coffee date you lied about." My mouth went dry. "Owen, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'm looking at photos of you and Callum at 4 different restaurants over the past month. I'm looking at text messages you thought you'd deleted. I'm looking at credit card receipts for lingerie I've never seen and hotel rooms you've never mentioned." He slid a photograph across the table. It was me and Callum leaving the restaurant tonight, his arm around my waist, my face turned up toward his like a flower seeking sunlight. "This was taken 2 hours ago," Owen continued in that same eerily calm voice. "So please, explain to me how you were working late on a Saturday night presentation." I stared at the photograph, at the undeniable evidence of my betrayal, and felt something crumble inside me. There was no talking my way out of this, no explanation that would make any of it okay. "It's not what you think," I said weakly, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Owen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's not what I think. Morwenna, I think you've been having an affair with your ex-boyfriend for the past month. I think you've been lying to me, to our daughter, to our families. I think you've been making a fool of me while I tried to figure out what I'd done wrong." The pain in his voice was like a physical blow. This was Owen, who loved me, who'd been patient with my moods and my insecurities, who'd built a life with me and asked for nothing but honesty in return. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but the words felt pathetic, inadequate. "Are you? Because you don't look sorry. You look like you got caught." He was right. Sitting there in my expensive dress with Callum's scent still clinging to my skin, I didn't feel sorry. I felt cornered, exposed, but not sorry. Maybe that's what finally broke something in Owen's expression. "I want you out," he said quietly. "What?" "Out of this apartment. Tonight. You can take whatever you need, but I want you gone by morning." Panic tasted metallic on my tongue. This wasn't the script. Owen was supposed to shout, beg, give me the stage to cry and explain and be forgiven like always. Instead, he was quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. "You can't kick me out. This is my home too. What about Lily?" "Lil's asleep," he said, voice flat as the manila folder in his hand. "And tomorrow she'll wake up in her home. With me, you'll see her on supervised visits until the judge says otherwise." Supervised. The word punched the air out of me. "Custody? Owen, come on, we can fix this." "No, Morwenna, we can't." He tapped the folder once, like closing a ledger. "Because I didn't just find out tonight. I've known for 6 weeks. Every coffee that ran long, every girl's night, every time you showered the second you walked in the door." The investigator has photos, receipts, keycard logs from the Marriott on 8th. It's all here. Divorce. The word left my mouth as barely a breath. He heard it anyway. Did you think I'd thank you for the excitement, smile and say, glad you got it out of your system? I love you, I lied, because it was the only card I had left. Owen looked at me the way you look at a stranger who's asked for money on the subway. Tired, sad, already walking away. You don't love me. You love how safe I made you feel while you went hunting for danger. There's a difference. He started down the hall, then stopped. You've got until Lily wakes up. After that, the locks get changed and my lawyer calls yours. I suggest you find one. Where am I supposed to go? Try Callum's. He's got that big empty flat and even bigger empty promises. My phone vibrated against my thigh. Callum, tonight was incredible. Same time next week. I stared at those fire emojis while the man who'd loved me through stretch marks and 3 a.m. fevers and every ugly day of the last 3 years closed the bedroom door without a sound. Something inside me finally snapped into focus. I blocked Callum, deleted the thread, started throwing clothes into the same overnight bag I'd used for our work trips. By 6:07 a.m., I was sitting on the sidewalk with one suitcase and no plan, watching the sun come up over an apartment that wasn't mine anymore. Inside, I heard Lily's sleepy voice call, "Daddy?" and Owen's calm answer, the same voice that once read her bedtime stories, and now had to explain why Mommy left before breakfast. I cried on the curb until my ride came, because for the first time in months, I was the one with no one to lie to. Owen deserved the truth. He also deserved never having to see my face again, so I gave him both.